Western world, God is the Judeo-Christian deity and God is any of the others. Give me a definition of a God and I'll tell you whether I'm an atheist, or a theist. I'm definitely anti-Yahwehist and anti-Zoroasterist, since these creatures are self-contradictory and absurd, and since there exist natural explanations for the origins of those myths. If you define God as a natural species of superior extraterrestrials or orbiting Proxima Centauri, then I am an atheist, a soft negative atheist, via agnosticism. I have no present basis for belief in such things, though I am open to evidence. If you want to identify God merely as the principle of love or some other semantic twist of fuzzy liberal theology, then I guess you could call me a theist by that limp, impersonal definition, though I would avoid the word because it would be meaningless and confusing. When you speak, the word God and God sound the same. Naming a natural phenomenon God is ambiguous, since it traditionally implies a superior being or transcendent mind. If God is just a synonym for some other natural concept for which we already have a good label, then it can be, should be, thrown away. There are some who avoid the word atheist because of the popular stigma attached to it. In a context where they might be labeled and possibly misunderstood, they prefer to be called rationalists, agnostics, or non-theists. I'm not opposed to this. I think there can be some very good reasons for keeping views private, such as family harmony or job security. Some atheists join the Unitarian Universalist Church for that reason. Unitarianism, a creedless religion, can make a great cover, especially if you're running for public office. Some people just have a distaste for any label. On the other hand, there are atheists like myself who view the stigma as an advantage, as a chance to be on the cutting edge. If you're discussing religion and you're an atheist, well, why not say so? Some of us atheists figure that the word has suffered from bad press, and it's time to correct the image. That's why I wrote the song, Friendly Neighborhood Atheist. Although atheism is a negatively constructed word, just meaning not theism, this does not mean it is a negative concept. It's a double negative. Consider other positive ideas that are constructed as negative words: nonviolence, independence, antidotes, antibiotics. Since a belief in a God is irrational and potentially dangerous, atheism, the lack of such belief, is positive. Since leaving fundamentalism, I have noticed that contrary to what I used to preach, most atheists seem to be deeply concerned with human values. Why is this? Perhaps it's because any person who has the impulse and the courage to be identified as an atheist in today's society must be deeply motivated by something. Maybe it's anger at religious immorality, disgust with superstitious anti-intellectualism, fears of the dangers of Christian intolerance, dissatisfaction with the way religious divisiveness interferes with true compassion, empathy for the victims of sectarian bigotry, outrage at the hypocrisy of believers, impatience with the churches that actively retard social progress. Whatever the moral motivation may be, it likely originates in a mind that is deeply concerned with fairness and compassion, love for real human beings, and concern for this world, not merely a rational approach to truth that rejects arguments for a supernatural being. My own rejection of religious morality, if that's not a contradiction in terms, is a byproduct of the drive to discover a better system of ethical principles for my species and me. Have atheists ever built any hospitals? I am sometimes asked. Yes, they have. The obvious example is the Soviet Union, with an officially atheistic government where hundreds of hospitals were constructed. In the United States, university hospitals, such as the one in my own city of Madison, Wisconsin, are entirely secular, built with tax dollars from all citizens, atheists as well as theists. Atheists tend not to flaunt their views like many denominations that name their institutions Baptist Hospital or St. Mary's Clinic. Of course, most of these religious hospitals receive public money, and they all charge the same high rates. So there's very little charity offered. The religion gets the credit, but the taxpayer gets the bill. Until religious bigotry is lessened, how many believers would choose to go to First Atheist Hospital? Two non-believing brothers from Baraboo, Wisconsin, who widely use their name rather than their religious opinions to identify their work, built the famous Ochsner Clinic in New Orleans. University College Hospital in London was founded by people who were disappointed with the way sectarian hospitals were giving preferential treatment to members. One of the members of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, Dr. Edward Gordon, was an atheist physician who donated his time and money to bring free medical care to poor villagers in the mountains of the Philippines. He climbed those hills and tended to those people, working alongside Catholic doctors who often charged for their services, never thinking he would receive any other reward than the satisfaction of helping others. What about faith? Some believers agree with us, atheists, that the evidence for God is weak, even non-existent. Many concur that the arguments for God are ultimately unconvincing unless you are predisposed to believe. It all comes down to faith, they say. Faith would be unnecessary, they remind us, if God's existence were proven to be a blunt fact of reality. There would be no way to separate the good believers from the bad unbelievers. Since faith is a virtue, proof of God's existence would deny us the opportunity to impress God with our character. If belief were easy, it would count for little in demonstrating our loyalty and trust of our Father. But this is a huge cop-out. If the only way you can accept an assertion is by faith, then you are admitting that the assertion can't be taken on its own merits. If something is true, we don't invoke faith. Instead, we use reason to prove it. Faith is intellectual bankruptcy. With faith, you don't have to put any work into proving your case or overcoming objections. You can just believe it. Truth does not ask to be believed. It asks to be tested. Scientists do not join hands every Saturday or Sunday and sing, "Yes, gravity is real. I know gravity is real. I will have faith. I will be strong. I believe in my heart that what goes up, up, up must come down, down, down. Amen." If they did, we would think that they were pretty insecure about the concept. Faith is actually agnosticism. Faith is what you use when you don't have knowledge. When someone says the meeting is at 7:30, I believe, they are expressing some doubt. When you tack "I believe" onto a comment, does that make it stronger? If faith is valid, then anything goes. Muslims believe in Allah by faith, so they must be right. The Hindus are right. The Greeks and Romans were right. Some people can claim to have seen or been healed by Elvis Presley, than ever claim to have seen the resurrected Jesus. But with faith, everybody's right. Even they're right. Suppose an atheist refusing to look at any religious claims were to say, "You must have faith that there is no God. If you believe in your heart that nothing transcends nature and that humanity is the highest judge of morality, then you will know that atheism is true." That will make you a better person. Wouldn't the Christians snicker? Would they just laugh their asses off if we were to say that shit? But I guess it's all fine and dandy when they say it to us. Hebrews 11:1 says, "Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." In other words, faith is the evidence of non-evidence. It's a free lunch, a perpetual motion machine. It's a way to get there by not doing any work. Hebrews 11:6 says, "Without faith, it is impossible to please him, for he that cometh to God must believe that he is." Even the Bible admits that you can't know if God exists. You just have to believe he does. Abraca-fucking-dabra. Jesus reportedly said, "If ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, ye shall say unto this mountain, Remove hence to ponder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible." How many faith peddlers could pass this straightforward test? If Christians are not doing stupendous acts, then how do they know that their faith in God is valid at all? How do they know that they're even saved at all? Paul says, "For by grace are ye saved through faith, not of works, lest any man should boast." But James says, "Ye see then how that by works a man is justified, and not by faith only." And believers saved by works, or aren't they? So which one is it? Religionists sometimes accuse non-believers of having faith. Every time you flip a light switch, you exercise faith, they say. But this is not faith. It is a rational expectation based on experience and knowledge of electricity. If the light fails to turn on, my worldview is not shattered. I expect that the light will sometimes fail due to a burnt-out bulb, blown circuit, or some other natural cause. This is the opposite of religious faith. The light does not turn on because of my expectation. Rather, my expectation is based on experience. If lights were to begin failing most of the time, I would have to adjust my expectations, or adjust my electrical system, one of the two. But religious faith is not adjustable. It remains strong in spite of a lack of evidence, or in spite of contrary evidence. Sometimes we non-believers might express faith, but when we do, if we are not pretending that our faith makes the statement true, we often assert trust or confidence in something that is not known 100%. For example, I respect my dad tremendously for what I've known of him. I have faith and trust in his character. But this does not mean I know everything, nor does it mean I can't be wrong about him. It is possible that my dad is actually a serial murderer who has not been caught yet, although I doubt it. The point is that although I do often express sentiments with near absolute confidence, I'm open to the possibility that I might be wrong, admitting that my faith claim is not a knowledge claim. My dad has earned my respect. God has not. Scientists do something similar when they claim that a fact can be asserted when the evidence passes a certain threshold, such as the common 95% level. In fact, I think all knowledge is like this. We probably can't say we know a thing with 100% certainty, except maybe I think, therefore I am. And even that has its critics. But scientific confidence is not faith. It is a tentative acceptance of the truth of a hypothesis that has been repeated, tested, and is subject to being overturned in the light of new evidence. The data and methods of testing are publicized, peer-reviewed, and open to any of us for examination. This is nothing at all like religious faith, which makes a leap from possibility to fact, or often from impossibility to fact. Some believers say it's just a matter of degree. If scientists are allowed to make a leap from 95% to fact, they reason, then believers are allowed to make a similar leap from any probability to fact. Even if this is true, after examining all the evidence and reasoning, I'm convinced that the probability of the existence of God is way below 50%, way below even 5%. If we're going to allow any leaps, then they should round off in both directions. Anything over 50% can round off to true, and anything under 50% to false. If theists can say God exists with less than 100% certainty, they should let me say, even if I admit less than 100% uncertainty, that God does not exist. The Bible says that the ungodly are like chaff which the wind blows away. That's fine with me. I prefer the winds of free thought to the chains of orthodoxy. Chapter 6. Refuting God. Theists claim that there is a God. Atheists do not. Religionists often challenge atheists to prove that there is no God. But this misses the point. In general, atheists claim that God is unproved, not disproved. In any argument, the burden of proof is on the one making the claim. Now, of course, if a specific God is defined incoherently with mutually incompatible properties, then such a being, by definition, is logically proven not to exist. Some atheists feel the entire debate is pointless until the term God is made understandable. Words like spirit and supernatural have no reference in reality, so why discuss a meaningless concept? Some theists first try to argue for a general undefined God, or for the reasonableness of the God concept, trying to establish the existence of or likelihood of some kind of creator or intelligent designer before moving on to argue for their particular God. This is a legitimate debate. Is there a God? As opposed to, does God exist? But let's not make the mistake of thinking it's a balanced controversy between two equally likely positions. Yes for the theist, no for the atheist. The burden of proof is always on the shoulders of the affirmative, not the negative. Dumbass. That's to you motherfuckers who are like, you haven't proved that he doesn't exist. Yeah, because logic doesn't work that way, dum-dums. Maybe if you actually gave a shit about logic, you would have known that, and you wouldn't ask such silly Billy questions. But yet, here we are. The burden of proof is always on the shoulders of the affirmative, not the negative. Innocent until proven guilty, that is. If a person claims that an anti-gravity device exists, it is not incumbent on others to prove that it doesn't exist. The proponent must make a case beyond a reasonable doubt. Everyone else is justified in withholding belief until evidence is produced and substantiated. Many theists have tried over the centuries to prove a God exists. There are many lines of theistic reasoning and volumes have been written on each. Many of these arguments are reduced to a God of the gaps strategy. At most, the theists might prove the existence of a current gap in human knowledge, but this does not justify filling that gap with their God. After all, what happens when the gap closes someday? The gaps are actually what drives science. If we had all the answers, there would be no more science. The following paragraphs briefly summarize some of the most common theistic arguments and the refutations. Atheism is the default position that remains when all theistic claims are dismissed. How can you explain the complex order of the universe? I can't believe the beauty of nature just happened by accident. Design requires a designer, they say. This is probably the most common argument for a God, but it merely assumes what it wishes to prove. Any attempt to quote unquote explain anything requires a higher context within which it can be understood. To ask for an explanation of the natural universe is simply to demand a higher universe, effortlessly conjuring up the answer to the question. The universe, or the cosmos, is all there is. It is not a thing. A God would certainly be part of all there is. And if the universe requires an explanation, then God requires a God ad infinitum. If by universe, we mean only our own local observable universe within a larger cosmos of multiple universes, perhaps we might call it a thing. Then, however, its context would be natural, not supernatural, and the designer, if it existed, would be natural, and the question shifts to the explanation of the complexity of the entire cosmos with the same problem. The mind of a designer would at least be as complex and orderly as the nature it created, and would be subject to the same question, who made God? Richard Dawkins calls this God the ultimate Boeing 747, playing off the complaint that a windstorm blowing through a junkyard would not likely produce a complicated jet airplane. He notes that a designer of such a machine must be more complex than the machine itself. However, if functional complexity requires a designer, then the mind of the designer, being even more functionally complex than its creation, also requires a designer. If it doesn't, then the argument is dishonest. You can't require that everything except what you're arguing for needs a designer. That brings your desired conclusion into your premise. This is known as begging the question and is illogical. It reminds me of the cartoon of the witch doctor coming down from the smoking volcano and announcing to the people, God told me that this wrath will be appeased by the sacrifice of somebody other than myself. There is design in the universe, but to speak of design of the universe is just theistic semantics. The design that we do see in nature is not intelligent. Living organisms are the result of the mindless, uncaring reality of natural selection that builds complexity in extremely tiny increments over vast periods of time by keeping survival advantages through the blunt process of weeding out failures, which are denied the opportunity to produce by being eaten, starved, frozen, killed in competition or accidents, or beat to mating opportunities, or not being chosen as a mate, and so on. The only genes that get passed on are the genes from successful parents. For whatever reason, their environment allowed reproduction to happen, and those genes have a better chance of becoming the fittest to survive, quote unquote, if the environment doesn't change too much in the next generation. Extinction is the ultimate weeding out, though this can make room for other species. We humans owe a lot to the elimination of other species, such as the dinosaurs. Evolution explains how complexity can arise from simplicity. Creationism can't do that. It tries to explain complexity with more complexity, and so it explains nothing. Many theists accept the fact of evolution. I mean, how could they not, with all the evidence and surroundings supporting natural selection? But they remind us that the initial appearance of self-replicating molecules has not yet been explained, and they are correct. Although there are many good hypotheses, we still don't know how this happened. But this does not allow theists to fold their arms and say, see, you don't know. We have an answer and you don't. We're smarter than the scientists. That argument for God is based on ignorance, not facts. It is a God of the gaps argument. Failure to solve a natural riddle at this time does not mean there's no answer. For millennia, humans have created mythical answers to mysteries, such as thunder and fertility. But the more we learn, the fewer gods we need. God belief is just answering a mystery with a mystery, and therefore it doesn't answer anything. The universe appears to be fine-tuned for life. The odds against all the various constants randomly falling into the narrow range required for life to exist are so astronomically high that it's virtually impossible for it to have happened by chance. There must have been a fine-tuner of the universe. The phrase fine-tuning appears to beg the question because it implies a tuner. But if we treat it metaphorically to mean appearance of fine-tuning, as we do with appearance of design, then we can proceed with the argument. Still, it suffers from various defects. First, how do we know if any of those constants could have been different from what they are? And if they could, by how much? The only way to compute odds is to divide one number by another. So if the constants could have been different, what is the ratio between the range of possible values and the range of life-allowing values? Until these numbers are known, there is no way to assign a probability. We only say that it seems unlikely from what we know. Second, life as we know it is not the only type of life that might arise in a universe. The likelihood against any one particular life might indeed be something we would not bet on, but the likelihood of some kind of life might be very high or even probable. Until we know how many kinds of life are possible, there is no way to produce two numbers to divide. Third, how many chances are there? If there's only one shot at a universe, a simple opportunity to tune the constants, then the odds indeed seem high against life forming. But if there are many opportunities, such as many big bangs occurring, then that raises the numerator in the fraction, upping the odds for life. How do we know how many universes or big bangs there might be? That number is greater than 0 since it happened at least once. If it can be only one attempt, how do we know that? What law or principle would limit the number of universes to exactly one? After all, theists believe we should not impoverish our imaginations regarding the possibility of an eternal, omnipotent being. So why should we place limits on the cosmos? Most cosmologists now use the word cosmos to talk about all there is, and the word universe to talk about a particular observable universe such as our own within the larger cosmos. Many or most cosmologists are now convinced that some kind of multiverse is likely. A multiverse is a collection of universes, and there are many scenarios. Physicist Paul Davies said that some kind of limited multiverse is probable, although I wonder what that limit would be. He probably means it's just not infinite. He says we have hit the cosmic jackpot, which is just another way of saying that we happen to be in one of those universes that allow life. Well, obviously, some multiverses are spatial, assuming the immense inflation of the early universe, meaning that the cosmos is so unimaginably huge that there's room for trillions and trillions of bubble universes, ours being just one bubble in the huge champagne glass. Others propose a string of big bangs, one after the other, in an oscillating universe in which ours is the current iteration. This seems to be less likely, though, that now that we see the acceleration of the expansion of the universe. Others propose multi-dimensions, or billions of universes concurrently existing side by side. Still, others suggest that there are splitting universes and alternate realities, with each instant of time following every possible path. This would put us in one of those paths, while our alternate selves would be in other paths, and everyone thinking they're on the same one, or the only one. There are other multiverse scenarios as well. We have not proved such a multiverse of universes yet. All we know is that they are plausible and that there is at least one. The important point here is that if there is more than one, then the numerator of the fraction that determines probability rises, making the fine-tuning of the constants, if they vary, to allow for life by random chance more likely. In fact, some think the numerator is much higher than the denominator, meaning it would be a true miracle if life never happened anywhere in the cosmos. Some even think that the number is so inconceivably huge that universes must repeat themselves. And you know, or someone identical to you have already read this book. My brother, Daryl, asked me to explain this principle, the law of large numbers and probability, which our brains did not evolve to intuitively grasp. So I asked him to imagine the following. I have a box with 12 unique coins in it. A penny, a nickel, a dime, a quarter, $50, and $1 in both US and Canadian currency. I give the box one shake to produce an arrangement of heads and tails. Then I give an identical box to him and ask him to give it a shake. Would he bet that he got the same result? Daryl said, well, no, of course not. It would be very unlikely. Next, I asked him to imagine 1,000 people, each with an identical box of 12 coins, each giving their box one shake. What would he think then? In that case, Daryl said he would bet that there was a match. What if instead of any one of those boxes matching my box, they just had to match another box in the bunch? Or what if each box was shaken 1,000 times, and so on? In those cases, Daryl agrees with me that we would have a sure winner. But those numbers are small in comparison to the universe. In most multiverse scenarios, there are trillions upon trillions to a high power of universes, each being shaken. In some scenarios, the number is infinite. If God can be thought infinite, why can't the cosmos? Most of those universes will be stillborn, producing nothing that would resemble life, but many of them will not. Many of them will happen to match the universe we're in. Theists might point out that we have no direct evidence of such a multiverse, but then neither do we have evidence of a God. The universe is governed by natural laws. Laws require a lawgiver. There must be a divine governor. The universe is not governed by anything, nor is it obeying anything. There's a difference between prescriptive laws and descriptive laws. Natural laws are merely human definitions of the way things normally behave, not prescriptive mandates as with societal laws. When I let go of a pencil, it does not think, oh, the force is released and I am free to move. I better move toward the center of the earth or I'm in deep trouble with my designer. A photon does not restrain itself by saying, go easy on the gas pedal. I don't want to get a ticket for traveling faster than the speed of light. The laws of nature, unlike the laws of traffic, describe what does happen, not what we would like to happen. Using these laws allows us to make predictions so that when matter behaves according to natural regularity, it seems as if it is conforming to what our minds are expecting to happen. You are a very obedient raindrop. You're accelerating just like you're supposed to according to the laws of gravity, and you're also obeying the laws of friction by letting air resistance slow you to a constant velocity. Good raindrop. Besides, if this argument were valid, the mind of a god not being a random jumble of synapses would equally be governed by the sum laws of order itself, thus requiring a higher lawgiver. It's impossible that the complexity of life occurred by accident. The second law of thermodynamics, which states that all systems tend to disorder, makes evolution impossible. There must have been a creator. No biologist claims that an organism suddenly appeared in one random arrangement of atoms, or that any particular species was inevitable. Life as we know it, humans, for example, did not have to evolve. Any of megatrillions of viable possibilities might have adapted, making it quite likely that something would survive the ruthlessness of natural selection. It was not aiming at us. Using probability after the fact is like a lottery winner saying, it was highly unlikely that out of the millions of entrants, I could have picked the right ticket. Therefore, someone must have caused me to win. It's indeed highly unlikely that any particular person can be predicted to be the winner, which is exactly what each contestant is trying to do when he or she obtains a ticket. But it's not at all unlikely that one person will win. In fact, we would consider it a true miracle if no one ever won a lottery. In some lotteries, a winner is guaranteed, so there's no mystery at all. In the gargantuan lottery of natural selection, we should not be surprised that something like us became quote-unquote winners. People who are impressed with the design argument are like the guy who is amazed at all the rivers that were made to flow along state borders. How do they do that? It must have been a massive, expensive feat of engineering to divert all that water. Additionally, many rivers are made to flow conveniently to the major cities, right to us. There's no other explanation, he thinks, other than intelligent design. But this is backwards, hindsight design, our minds imposing a pattern after the fact. It was not inevitable that a river would be used as a state border, most are not. Nor was it inevitable that our life or any life would have arisen. We can't pass the analogy too far, however, because even though evolution and rivers both have branches, the flow is in opposite directions. But we can understand how people might look at the natural, winding, unbroken line of descent from ancestral life forms to their parents. Compare that with a river taking the path of least resistance and wonder, how did this happen? How did I get here? It must have been designed. Creationists usually misquote the second law of thermodynamics, which states that disorder increases in a closed system. The Earth is currently part of an open system, getting energy from the sun. Driven by the immense input of solar energy, complexity routinely increases, as with the growth of an embryo, or crystal, or storm system. Ultimately, of course, the sun will cool and life on Earth will disappear. Millions of people personally know God through an inner spiritual experience. Many theists claim their particular God can be known directly through meditation, prayer, or mystical experiences. I used to feel it, so I understand, but such experiences point to nothing outside the mind. Mysticism can be explained psychologically. It's not necessary to complicate our understanding of the universe with fanciful assumptions. We do know that many humans habitually invent myths, hear voices, hallucinate, and talk with imaginary friends. We do not know there is a God. There are millions of people who claim to know a deity, but this is a statement about humanity, not about the reality of their gods. Truth is not attained by vote. Religions differ radically, and appeals to inner experience only worsen the conflict. Believers in one particular God have no trouble dismissing the personal experiences of the believers of other gods, so they must agree with me that the human race possesses an immense propensity to subjectively know things that are wrong. What makes them exempt from such error crafting? Besides, if I were to say that I have an interpersonal knowledge that there is no God, would they take my word for it? Exactly. Why would so many people believe in a God if he doesn't exist? What is the explanation for such belief? If our brains have a receiver, doesn't that suggest a transmitter? Religions arose for various natural reasons, including dealing with death, illness, invaders, dreams, and fear of the unknown. Also, there is the usefulness of a tribal story to unite the people, the need to assume agency in nature. A useful assume the worst error that confers an automatic survival advantage over those without such a strategy. The need for our prematurely born, compared to other species, infants to submit to the authority of the father figure until they are mature enough to think for themselves, and so on. Religions can be powerful mechanisms for giving a feeling of meaning to life and personal cultural identity. But in addition to religion, we also possess nearly universal urges towards sexism and racism. And although these attitudes may have been useful to some of our tribal ancestors in a brutal evolutionary war, no one would think we are obligated to maintain the truth of such beliefs in the light of modern science and morality. The receiver-transmitter argument could be used to prove the existence of dead ancestors or anything else we dreamt about. Fuck. Atheists lack spiritual insight and can hardly criticize the theistic experience of God. That would be like a blind person denying the existence of color. Is faith a sixth sense that perceives other worlds? If so, then why don't we all have it? The blindness analogy is inapt because blind people do not deny the sense of light built into an organism or that color exists. Blind people know that they have eyes and neural pathways to vision centers in the brain, and they also know that their lack of sight is due to a malfunction of part of this machinery. The blind and the sighted live in the same world, and both can grasp the natural principles involved. The spectrum of frequencies of electromagnetic radiation that we call light can be experienced independently of vision. A machine can be built that emits a different sound frequency corresponding to a light frequency, and the blind person can hear it, examine it, and test it. The existence of color need not be taken by faith. If we atheists are lacking a spiritual sense, then where is it? How does it function? And what exactly is not working right? The theists give no independent means of testing spiritual insight, so it must be doubted. The skeptic does not deny the reality of subjective religious experience, but knows it can be psychologically explained without reference to a supposed transcendent realm. Dreams, for example, can seem real, but few people imagine they are in touch with another world when they're asleep. One of the indications that mentally ill people are getting healthy is when their obsession with religion decreases. When they stop saying they're talking to Moses or that they are Moses, we take it as a good sign. Those of us who do not talk with a God are not the ones with the problem. The charge that atheists are handicapped and that theists are truly complete human beings is unfounded and arrogant. We all have a feeling of right and wrong, a conscience which puts us under a higher law. This universal moral urge points us outside of humanity. It's consistent that God, a non-physical being, would relate to us by such sublime means. Here's another argument based on dumbassness. Ethical systems are based on the worth humans have assigned to life. Good is that which enhances life, and evil is that which threatens it. We do not need a deity to tell us it is wrong to kill, lie, or steal. Humans have always had the potential to use their minds to determine what is kind and reasonable. There is no universal moral urge, and not all ethical systems agree. Polygamy, human sacrifice, infanticide, cannibalism, wife beating, self-mutilation, foot binding, preemptive war, torture of prisoners, circumcision, female genital mutilation, racism, sexism, punitive amputation, castration, and incest are perfectly moral in certain cultures. Is God confused? To call God a non-physical being is contradictory. A being must exist as some form of mass in space and time. But even if such a being existed, what authenticity could its opinions hold regarding us physical creatures? Values reside within physical brains, so if morality points to God, then we are it. The God concept is just a projection of human ideals. There is no absolute moral standard. Then there is no ultimate right or wrong. Without God, there's no ethical basis, and social order would disintegrate. Our laws are based on scriptures. This is an argument for belief in a God, not for the existence of a God. The demand for absolute morality comes only from insecure religionists who don't trust, or have been told not to trust, their own moral reasoning. Voltaire quipped, if God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent him. Mature people are comfortable with the relativism of humanism since it provides a consistent, rational, and flexible framework for ethical human behavior without a deity. American laws are based on a secular constitution, not the Bible. Any scriptures that might support a good law do so only because they have met the test of human values, which long predate the ineffective Ten Commandments. There is no evidence that theists are more moral than atheists. In fact, the contrary seems to be true, as portrayed by centuries of religious violence. Most atheists are happy, productive, and moral. There have been some wonderful Christians and wonderful atheists. There have been horrible Christians and horrible atheists. Stalin was a horrible atheist. Hitler was a horrible Christian. People should be judged by their actions, not by their beliefs. Well, everything had a cause, and everything is the effect of a previous cause. Something had to start it all. God, who exists outside of time and space, is the external first cause, the unmoved mover, the creator, and the master of the universe. The major premise of this argument, everything had a cause, is contradicted by the conclusion that God did not have a cause. You can't have it both ways. If everything had to have a cause, then there could not be a first cause. If it is possible to think of a God as uncaused, then it is possible to think the same of the universe. Some theists, observing that all effects need a cause, assert that God is a cause, but not an effect. But no one has ever observed an uncaused cause, and simply inventing one merely assumes what the argument wishes to prove. If a God can be thought eternal, then so can the universe. The word cause is a transitive verb. Causality requires temporality. If God exists outside of time, he cannot cause anything. God can't be proved, but if God exists, the believer gains everything, and the unbeliever loses everything. If God doesn't exist, the believer loses nothing, and the unbeliever gains nothing. There's nothing, therefore, everything to gain and nothing to lose by believing in God. Pascal's wager. First formulated by French philosopher Blaise Pascal, is not an argument at all. It is sheer intimidation. It's not a case for a God's existence. It is an argument for belief based on a threat of violence. If you don't believe, you'll be tortured. With this kind of reasoning, we should simply pick the religion with the worst hell. The Islamic hell might be hotter than the Christian hell, so Christians, what if you're wrong? It's not true that the believer loses nothing. We diminish this life by preferring the myth of an afterlife. We sacrifice honesty to the maintenance of a lie. Religion demands time, energy, and money, draining valuable human resources from the improvement of this world. Religious conformity, a tool of tyrants, is a threat to freedom. Nor is it true that the unbeliever gains nothing. Rejecting religion can be a positive and liberating experience that allows you to gain perspective and freedom of inquiry. Free thinkers have always been in the forefront of social and moral progress. Non-believers have more time since they are not wasting money or resources on the non-existent supernatural shit. Non-believers have more ability to make this world a better place. How do poor churchgoers explain to their hungry children that God needs the milk money more than they do? I'm just wondering. Anyway, what kind of person would externally torment an honest doubter? If their God is so unjust, then theists are in as much danger as atheists. Perhaps God will get a perverted thrill from changing his mind and damning everyone, believers and unbelievers alike. Pascal was a Catholic and assumed that the existence of a God meant the Christian God. However, the Islamic Allah might be the true God, which turns Pascal's wager into a riskier gamble than intended. I have my own bet, Baker's wager, if you will. Suppose there is a God, but he is only going to reward those people who had enough courage not to believe in him. This God is no less likely than Pascal's. By believing in a God, Christians are risking eternal torture. When they die, they will be very surprised, and so will we atheists. In any case, basing belief in a deity on fear does not produce admiration. It does not follow that such a being deserves to be worshipped. Well, God is a being than which no greater being can be conceived. If God does not exist in actuality, then he can be conceived to be greater than there is. Therefore, God exists. There are dozens of varieties of the ontological argument, but St. Anselm was the first to articulate it in this manner. The flaw in this reasoning is to treat existence as an attribute. Existence is a given. Nothing can be great or perfect that doesn't first exist, so the argument is backwards. A good way to expose this reasoning is to replace being and God with some other words. You could prove the existence of a perfect void, which would mean nothing exists. The argument squashes itself because God can be conceived to have infinite mass, which is disproved empirically, and it is comparing apples and oranges to assume that existence in conception can somehow be related to existence in actuality. Even if the comparison holds, why is existence in actuality greater, whatever that means, than existence in conception? Perhaps it's the other way around. No wonder Bertrand Russell said all ontological arguments are a case of bad grammar. The Bible is historically reliable. There's no reason to doubt the trustworthy testimonies that would hold up in the court. God exists because he has revealed himself through Scripture. The Bible reflects the culture of its time. Though much of its setting is historical, much isn't. For example, there is no contemporary support for the Jesus story outside the Gospels, which were anonymously written 30 to 80 years after the supposed crucifixion. Many accounts, like the creation stories, conflict with science. The stories of the Bible are just that, stories. The Bible is contradictory. A glaring example is the discrepancy between the genealogies of Jesus given by Matthew and Luke. The story of the resurrection of Jesus, told by at least 5 different writers, is hopelessly irreconcilable. Scholars have noted hundreds of biblical errors that have not been satisfactorily addressed by apologists. The Bible, like other religious writings, can be accounted for in purely natural terms. There's no reason to demand it either be entirely true or false. Christianity is filled with parallels from pagan myths, and its emergence as a 2nd century Messiah cult stems from its Jewish sectarian origins. The gospel authors admit they are writing religious propaganda, which is a clue that it should be taken with a grain of salt. Thomas Paine, in The Age of Reason, pointed out that Scripture cannot be revelation. Revelation, if it exists, is a divine message communicated directly to some person. As soon as that person reports it, it becomes secondhand hearsay. No one is obliged to believe it, especially if it's fantastic. It is much more likely that reports of the miraculous are due to honest error, deceit, or zealous theological interpretations, or perfectly natural events. Outrageous claims require outrageous proof. A criterion of critical history is the assumption of natural regularity over time. This precludes miracles, which, by definition, override natural law. If we allow for miracles, then all documents, including the Bible, become worthless as history. There are many scientists who believe in God, and if many of the world's most intelligent people are theists, then belief in God must be sensible. This is just an appeal to authority, which atheists could do equally well or better. Academics as a group are much less religious than the general population, and scientists as a group are the least religious of academics. Now, though it is easy to find token scientists who believe some of them can scientifically demonstrate their faith, but belief is actually a cultural or personal matter, separate from occupation, and no one, not even a scientist, is immune from the irrational seductions of religion. Well, the new science of quantum physics is showing that reality is uncertain and less concrete. There's now room for miracles. A theistic worldview is not inconsistent with science now. A miracle is supposed to be a suspension of natural laws that points to a transcendent realm. If the new science makes miracles naturally possible, then there is no supernatural realm and no God. In quantum physics, the term uncertainty does not apply to reality, but to our knowledge of reality. There is disagreement about interdeterminacy. Some think it's only in our minds, and others think nature is intractably indeterminate. But the only thing that can be uncertain is a mind. Theism implies a supernatural realm. Science limits itself to the natural world, so theism can never be consistent with science, by definition. Belief in God is not intellectual. Reason is limited. The truth of God is only known by a leap of faith, which transcends but does not contradict reason. This is no argument. Admitting that something is not intellectual removes it from the realm of discussion. Yes, reason is limited. It is limited to the facts. If you ignore the facts, you are left with nothing but hypotheses or wishful thinking. Faith is the acceptance of the truth of a statement in spite of sufficient or contradictory evidence and has never been consistent with reason. Faith, by its very invocation, is a transparent admission that religious claims cannot stand on their own 2 feet. Sartre said that to believe is to know you believe. To know you believe is to not believe. Even if theism were a consistent hypothesis, which it isn't, it would still need to be proved. This is why most theists downplay proof and reason and emphasize faith, sometimes ludicrously claiming that science requires faith or that atheism is a religion. There's strong evidence of psychic powers, reincarnation, and such. You have to admit there's something out there. Most scientists disagree that there is strong evidence for parascientific claims. When carefully examined with rigid controls, these claims are generally exposed as misinterpretations or outright fraud. Even if they were legitimate, mysterious phenomena could have perfectly natural explanations, and even if they didn't, they wouldn't necessarily point to a god. In such cases, skeptics prefer to withhold judgment rather than jump to superstitious conclusions. It should be noted that even if the theistic arguments I've covered here were valid, they would not establish the creator as a singular entity, nor would they establish a creator that is personal, perfect, or currently alive. Also, none of these theistic arguments address the presence of chaos, ugliness, and pain in the world, which makes an omnipotent deity responsible for evil. Since, by careful examination, all theistic arguments are faulty, atheism remains the only rational position. Religion. A system of thought or practice that claims to transcend our natural world and which demands conformity to a creed, Bible, or Savior. God. A being who created and or governs the universe. It is usually defined with personal aspects like intelligence, will, wisdom, love, and hatred, and with superhuman aspects like omnipotence, omniscience, immortality, omnibenevolence, and omnipresence. And it is most often pictured interacting with humanity, but is sometimes held to be an impersonal force or nature itself. Theism, belief in a personal God or gods. Deism, belief in an impersonal God or gods, or a God who may no longer exist or who is absent and irrelevant. Atheism, absence of belief in any God. Agnosticism, refusal to accept the truth of a proposition for which there is insufficient evidence or logical justification. Most agnostics suspend belief in a God, which would therefore make them atheists. Free thought, the practice of forming opinions about religion on the basis of reason without reference to authority, tradition, or established belief. Rationalism, the idea that all beliefs should be subject to the proven methods of rational inquiry. Special treatments like faith or authority, which are not allowed in other disciplines, are not acceptable for analyzing religion. Truth, the degree to which a statement corresponds with reality and logic. Reality, that which is directly perceivable through our natural senses or indirectly ascertained through the careful use of reason. Reason, a tool of critical thought that limits the truth of a proposition by the tests of verification, repeatability, falsifiability, what in theory would disprove it and have all such attempts failed, parsimony, and logic. Humanism. Secular humanism is a rationalistic, natural outlook that makes humanity the measure of values. All of these words have suffered from multiple definitions. The definitions of religion and God, of course, can vary with the believer. Most atheists consider themselves to be free thinkers, rationalists, agnostics, and humans, since they are not mutually exclusive labels. Agnosticism is here defined by Huxley's original intention, though current popular usage wrongly views it as a halfway house between theism and atheism.